This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 387, Chat GPT. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Today we're talking about Chat GPT with Ezequiel Lanza. Ezequiel works as an AI open source evangelist at Intel and is frequently a conference presenter and the creator of use cases, tutorials, and guides to help developers adopt open source AI tools like TensorFlow and Hugging Face. I always want to say Hugging Faces, and I only heard about this a minute ago. He also holds a master's in data science. Ezequiel, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm John Picozzi, Solutions Architect at EPAM, and today my co-hosts are, as usual, Nick Laughlin, founder of Enlightened Development.
Good morning. Very excited about this show. Looking forward to... I have so many questions.
And joining us for the last time, Catherine Druckman, open source evangelist at Intel.
Hey, I'm a little sad now. I feel like I'm finally in the groove, but thank you. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really excited about this one because we got my buddy roped in to talk about AI, so it's gonna be fun.
Catherine, thank you for joining us for the last 4 weeks. It's been awesome, and you don't have to feel bad because you now can come back anytime you want and join us and talk about whatever you like. So feel free to come back on a future show.
And we'll always have Slack.
And there will always be Slack, forever Slack, and fun emojis and all the things that come with Slack. All right, let's now jump into our module of the week. Let's bring in Martin Anderson-Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and maintainer of a number of Drupal modules of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, John. This week, I thought we would talk about a module called Search API Solr Boost by User Term, which allows you to boost search results that share a taxonomy term reference with a particular visitor. So it's a module that was created in August of 2021, and then there was a stable 1.0 release almost a year later to provide Drupal 10 compatibility. So hasn't seen a ton of maintenance. Officially, actually, right now, Drupal.org says that it's used on 0 sites, although I know I have it personally installed on a couple of demo sites. It actually has no bugs out of 3 open issues as well. So as you probably guessed by now, the maintainer, the creator of the module is me, and it's actually similar to a module that we touched on a few weeks ago called Views User Term Filter. So what they have in common is really trying to share content or promote content to your site visitors that kind of aligns with how they have their profile configured. This one is potentially a bit more subtle because it's really meant to be within search results, and it's actually sort of boosting within a set of search results content that kind of aligns with users, and you can configure the degree of that boost. And so theoretically, you could have more than one boost. So you could, let's say, maybe you want to strongly promote content that is tagged with the same region that a visitor has, configured their profile to say that they're in, but maybe only do like a mild boost on content that's tagged with like their primary topic of interest, as an example. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I want to kind of clarify what this is because on first hearing this, you're like, well, can't you boost taxonomy terms already, right? But if you're thinking about this like movies and genres, right? If you have a taxonomy that says this is a horror movie, this is a comedy, right? And you boost that taxonomy term, that means that if somebody searches the word horror or comedy, it will return those results. But the difference between the default in this module is if I say I like horror and I search for clown, it's going to show me results that are tagged with horror before comedy, right? Is that correct?
So there's that, but then it's also that it's specific to, how a user has configured their profile. So normally without this, you would have to have like, a boost that would be sort of applied to everyone, whereas this one will vary by user based on specifically,
Wow.
what choices they made in their profile.
Yeah, it's basically maybe not a better example, but it's a type of personalization. It seems like an ability to personalize search results based on a user's selected terms. One question I have is, does it act on multiple terms? So, for example, if a user is it has set a location and then they've set a secondary term for maybe a specific city within, a state or something to that effect. Is it capable of saying like, okay, well, I'm going to boost this item because it meets both of those criteria further up the list?
So, yeah, if you're using sort of different taxonomies and there's matches in both, then it can basically stack those boosts to some degree. I'm not sure that it's currently at least written to sort of work with entity references where there might be sort of multiple values. So to say, if in my list of preferred, movie genres, I've got horror and comedy, to be able to sort of say, as long as there's one match, boost that, or those kinds of things. So there's definitely, the potential for it to become more sophisticated, but I think out of the box for simple use cases, it at least in my experience, it works really well.
So I actually just did a talk at Johnson Wales University on personalization and data and tracking and all that sort of stuff. So this is kind of interesting that we were talking about this. And the reason I'm asking that is I'm wondering, does this require an authenticated user in order to work correctly? Like, is there a way that you could essentially tag an anonymous user to be able to provide search results to them if you had some sort of inferred data that they provided? For example, if they went to a specific page on your website, you could tag them with like, oh, they like, they like horror movies, we'll say, going back to Nick's example.
So sometimes I like to draw a distinction between what I refer to as personalization and customization. So customization being the idea that it's an authenticated user who has provided you with explicit data, and then you use that to inform what you show them. Where personalization is more around being able to collect sort of behavioral information in terms of what a user is doing, potentially also for anonymous users, and then provide a set of customized content that goes beyond sort of the explicit data that you would have on that sort of customization side.
Right. Okay. I think that makes sense.
And so this module would be more on kind of, again, that customization idea of taking explicit data and then showing them things that align with that. Got it.
Because I see and maybe there's already a module that does something like that, but I see there being a benefit there to say like, hey, if there was a way to like, take the same approach for an anonymous user who's been, maybe been on a couple of pages or something like that.
So there definitely are sort of commercial products, but they tend to be more sort of, paid solutions for those kinds of things. Absolutely. The last thing I wanted to mention here is that this module actually depends on the user reference field cache context module to basically properly cache the results based on those different values that a user might have in the profile that are being used to boost the results. And I feel like this module, or sort of that cache context module, as well as this module, can also be good sort of learning starting points if you wanted to, create your own sort of custom cache context, or potentially write your own sort of search API, Solr, hook module to sort of do some other kind of customization. So, those are a couple of the reasons why I thought this would be a nice one to cover.
Just out of curiosity, if the query is the same for two users, like using the same term, is that cached and then reloaded for both? Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Martin's shaking his head yes for those people listening audibly. I do like the fact here that this module includes some of the longest named modules going right now, I believe.
I was thinking the same thing.
That's good. That's why, I'm going to jump on my non-code contribution soapbox for a second and say like, hey, marketers, if you're out there, like there are module developers that need help naming things and marketing things, and like, come to the open source community called Drupal. We need everybody.
Naming things is hard for sure.
It is, absolutely. Well, Martin, as always, thank you for joining us and providing us with another very enlightening module of the week. And let's go on to our primary topic. All right. ChatGPT is like all the rage right now. And as we'll probably learn today, there are other similar things out there, I think. But let's start with a pretty easy question, Ezekiel. What is ChatGPT? And then I actually want to know, sub question here, what does the GPT stand for?
All right, good, great. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. When we refer about transformers, is the algorithm that is underneath understanding the language, and it's the really engine that can help ChatGPT to work. But just to explain what is ChatGPT, we first need to understand what is a transformer, or what is a language model, a large language model. So you have underneath this GPT-3, for instance, that could be the version. Google has their own version, which is BERT. But what they basically are, they are models that are trained with all the text available that you can find in the internet. It is Wikipedia, it is Reddit, all the sites that they have text. This algorithm was trained on this particular stuff. So what it gives, and what is the beauty of this transformer or this algorithm, is it can detect patterns in the language. So when you ask something for GPT, the algorithm can know how to structure a phrase, or how to, I mean, if you like to write something legal, okay, the algorithm was trained with tons of documents related with legal stuff. So you can say, okay, could you write as a lawyer or as an artist? And he can probably do it because it was trained with tons of things, so he can mimic. The part of the chat in GPT is basically an extra layer. I mean, I would like to think that as an onion. So in the middle, you have the transformer, you have the algorithm, and you can have on top this extra layer, what is the conversational layer. So if you like to ask what happened 2 years ago in a conversational way, this AI application needs to talk to the transformer to validate, okay, if this person is asking me for this thing, okay, what the transformer can give me. The transformer can give you an answer or a poem or whatever, and he will need, in this conversational way, he will need the feedback of the user. So you can say, okay, you can make a second question, a third question, or whatever.
Okay.
So basically what it is, ChatGPT is something really, really easy to do. I mean, of course, in terms of the AI technology, it's really simple, because it's just a chat that has a lot of rules that they can know how to behave depending on each rule. But they have a huge algorithm underneath that can help you to give everything. And if you would like to use it, I mean, you can use the API. Hugging Face is providing the API for the transformer. OpenAI has an API, so on. So you can try to build your own application using ChatGPT, right? But it's more in the conversational way, which was really a huge impact. But it's not so complicated if you think about it.
It's basically like a friendly interface layer on top of an AI, right? I will say right now, now that I know what GPT stands for, it's ruined me, because now all I picture in my head is like Optimus Prime or Bumblebee. And like anytime somebody says GPT, that's going to be it for me. I'm just going to go right to Transformers and like, start.
More than meets the eye.
Exactly.
Well, so the next question is kind of, we've talked about AI already a couple of times. First question in, which stands for artificial intelligence, and I think artificial intelligence means a different thing if you're coming from media
My default type of intelligence.
or if you're coming from media perspective or from like a layman's perspective. I think there's probably a different meaning than from a data scientist perspective.
Yeah.
So as a data scientist, how would you define AI in this context?
Well, the way that I really like to say that is we can think artificial intelligence as the ability of a machine to perform cognitive functions or some functions as humans do. For instance, could be learning, reasoning, or even solving problems. That is a system, is an application, is something that is using in a kind of algorithm underneath. That could be machine learning, could be deep learning, could be transformers, could be whatever. But the application, when we talk about an application like a chatbot, I don't know, a recommendation system, that it's not just AI. I mean, it's not just the algorithm. You need to have the algorithm, you need to have rules, you need to have responsible AI, you need to have a lot of things to build an application. So, and it will be different, of course, depending if it's retail, if it's finance. There are multiple AI solutions, applications. I mean, the terms are used interchangeably. But what I think that the best solution is AI is the overall algorithms, software, code, and everything, in my opinion.
Okay.
So you threw out a term that I think we all like to throw out, and maybe some of us have a partial understanding of, but could you tell us really what is machine learning?
Well, machine learning, when we think in machine learning, the word learning is the really key, because when you are writing a code, any application that you are writing, you are explicitly saying what you would like to do, what you would like the application to do. For instance, if you are doing a CRM or a web page, you are explicitly saying, okay, I want that my application will do this thing. This will be the exceptions. This will be the errors. This how this application will work with the errors and so on. With machine learning, you are not explicitly saying how they can learn. So the only thing that you need to do is imagine like a black box. You have examples, and you need something in the middle that can automatically learn how to detect what you would like. For instance, if you would like to, the easier example for that is when you would like to train a model to recognize faces or cats or dogs. You just feed this algorithm with a bunch of images of faces or dogs, and the algorithm, it automatically learns with their own weights, and probably we have no idea how it works underneath, but it automatically learns or how to be trained to be able to detect or to perform this task that you are training. And once you have it, you can feed the algorithm with an image, and he can say, okay, there is a dog or there's not a dog.
So Ezekiel, now that we have a good understanding of like what ChatGPT is, what AI is, what machine learning is, right? We hear about common misconceptions of AI and systems like ChatGPT that they're going to replace humans, they're going to take over. Like you have that Transformers like Skynet theory of the end is near, right? I'm wondering because you're so involved in this, what are common misconceptions that you hear about, and can you debunk them, or do you have opinions on them as far as why they're misconceptions?
Yes, I think that mainly what we think is that the computers or the AI will replace us. The reality is that it will be empower us, because if we have these tools that can help you to not or to do the things better, which is it. I mean, it can sound like a marketing speech or a marketing thing, but the reality is that now if we can ask for an algorithm to give you some answer instead of wasting time looking for the answer, or if you need something like GitHub Copilot that can guide you while you are writing code, you can have someone or a machine that is helping you to say, okay, if I like to do that, try to use this code or try to do it in that way. I think that once you get involved and once you really understand what AI is and how it can help you, is when you start losing your fear about it, because we have two ways or AI. You have ENI, which is the narrow AI, and then we have the general AI. What we have today is the narrow AI. So I mean, you can use AI for specific topics, for specific things, and it could be a chatbot, okay, but a chatbot for customer service, a chatbot for financial, because you need to train the algorithm.
Right.
And general AI, it's when the machine can learn the things without being trained. So it could be something similar like a human, right? So
Right.
we are a bit far away of having some algorithms in that
Like
way.
we're not at sentient machine learning yet, where like, you know, machine learning is just happening on its own. Like, you know, an AI is kind of like working in its own kind of circle, right? Like a developer still has to kind of tell it what to do or tell it how to respond at some level, right?
Yeah. And also there is an important thing that is responsible AI that we talked yesterday with Catherine, is that even if the AI can be a bit crazy with their answers or could be biased, you still have some extra layer that you can put the limits and you can put the boundaries to say, okay, I would like the financial stuff to work in that particular stuff without biases, but it's a person that needs to implement that.
Yeah.
So having, I don't know, as you say, a transformer killing people and being really crazy, dominating the humanity, we are a bit far away, and I don't believe that I will reach that stage in someday, because we will limit that. I mean, we will use a lot in things that we can believe that it's pretty crazy, but when you realize, I mean, it's not so crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
So we're pretty far away from what was that movie with Will Smith?
Oh, iRobot.
I Am
iRobot.
Robot.
No,
Yeah, iRobot.
iRobot.
I think I mixed I Am Legend and
Legend,
iRobot there.
which is
Yeah,
a very
yeah.
different movie.
Right.
So I have a question for you, and I want to specify. I did ask ChatGPT this, and they told me that they're not going to tell me. I'm curious, how does ChatGPT work under the hood? So, you know, you mentioned that there's, you know, learning phase. It trained on all the publicly accessible information on the internet. You know, there's an algorithm underneath that kind of decides how to respond to things. But like, how is it doing that? You know, I mean, I'm a programmer. I'm not an AI expert. I'm not a machine learning expert. How does it work under the hood?
Yeah, I mean, if you want, you could do it. Just to separate in parts, you have the model at the beginning, which is able to understand everything. But this model, for instance, they can give you, when you are building something called conversational AI, you need to have a model that can understand, for instance, the phrase, right? So what it can give you, this model, he can give you, for instance, what is the intent of this phrase. So if you ask something, I would like to order a pizza, and the intent that you will get as a programmer, let's suppose that you are building from scratch, as a programmer, you will get order pizza or order whatever. I mean, the algorithm is able to transform the language. I mean, you can ask for a pizza in a different ways. I mean, it's not in the same way. So the algorithm is able to understand what you are feeling, what you are saying, and he will give you the intent. So once you know the intent of this phrase, you can, again, and I don't know, do or you can ask for other models. Okay, this person is asking to write a poem about something. The intent that you will get will be a poem about whatever, and you will go and you will talk to the transformer model who is trained to write poems, and you will ask for a poem, and you will get the poem, and you will show the poem to the person. So this is how the conversational AI works. So this part it's pretty manual, because you are writing the rules. You are, and even if you go to ChatGPT with some questions, they can say that he's not already trained for that, or he say I'm sorry. This is why they don't have the 100% possibilities that the person can ask, for instance. Most people is asking for things that the transformer has. Okay, it's fine. But when you start saying or asking for other things, it's when you can face a problem. And even if you can face a problem, you have your escape answer. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something really easy to do it. Of course, I'm not saying that it's easy, right? But
Yeah. So I think it might be interesting to pause for a second here and talk a little bit about some ChatGPT conversations. So I played around with it for a bit. There were some things that I asked it that really impressed me, and there were a couple of things I did discover that, like I said, I asked how it worked, it wouldn't tell me. There were other things that I asked it to do, and it just couldn't as well. So I just want to really briefly highlight a couple of things that were impressive. I asked it to tell me a story in Spanish because I was curious if it worked in other languages. And it did. It told me a short story in Spanish. And then I don't speak Spanish very well. So I asked it, I said, can you translate that for me to English? And it did. It translated it to English. I found that very impressive. Like I didn't have to say, can you translate the story you just told me? I just said, translate that, and it knew what I was talking about. Obviously, there's some guards in there, like you said. Like I asked how ChatGPT worked, how many servers there were, how many programmers, and it just wouldn't tell me any of those details, as I expected. The thing that it got wrong that I found was interesting is I was playing around with language again, and I wanted to see how far it would go. And so I was like, hey, tell me the word blue in another language, but don't tell me what the language is. I want to guess what the language is to see if it could do like a little game. And it would tell me the word blue in many different languages, but it would always tell me what the language was.
okay.
So it'd be like, I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it would say, this is blue. And then in quotes, it would say German. Like I could not get it to understand that I wanted it to tell me a word in another language, but not expose what the language was and let me guess it. So it doesn't understand kind of the game aspect, I guess, or the secret aspect. But those are the types of interactions that I've had with it. And I'm curious about how those types of problems as an architect, how those types of problems, like how do you decide which pieces to wire up? You mentioned that it will translate something to an intent, and then it will decide how that intent gets put into a transformer. How is that piece done? You said it's manual, but is it like, do you get a list of these are all the intents that failed, and then you look at it as a human and say, oh, that if you see that intent next time, you should send it to this transformer? Or is there some machine learning on that side too?
Basically, yes, they are manually done. I mean, you should have a list with all the intents and all the things. Of course, you can put some machine learning there, just to say, for instance, when it's something related with some particular intent. Okay, let's run this algorithm to detect or to fine tune my list or to fine tune that. But yes, and this is why not general AI, because you still need to write some code. And I believe that ChatGPT is really great, but it gives the potential that the transformer has, of course, but it also gives I don't know, if you only need to build a customer service chatbot, you can use this kind of things to build your own application. You could narrow down and can say, okay, this is great. It's not general, because I mean, it's a person. It could be like a person that you don't know everything, but it could be like Google that could make you a reference. So this is another part that is important, because when you ask to ChatGPT, he's always looking for information that the transformer can have. So the transformer was trained with data from, I don't know, 2015, I think, if I'm not wrong, to 2021. So it's 6 years of a lot of data, 6 or 10 years, I don't know the exact date, but it's a lot of data. And the model knows what happened from this age to the other age. But it's not able to Google some answers. If you like to look for some answers, it's not able to do it. So, but I think,
I think that's one of the places where you have to be really careful too, because it's not able to Google them, and sometimes instead of telling you that, it'll just make stuff up, right? So for example, I asked it to write a, one of the things I tested is like write a review for this Lego set for me. Like anybody that's seen the show knows I'm a fan of Lego, and it wrote a fairly detailed review of it that like you would make, looks kind of like somebody wrote it, and it got some general things right. It was like, it has about 310 pieces and 3 minifigures, and those details are wrong. It has 350 pieces and 2 minifigures, and then it described the minifigures, and it's just a random description of like the little Lego people, right? So if you look at it on its face, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's right. But if you look at the actual details,
Exactly.
they're not always accurate.
Yeah. So I think like that begs a deeper dive into like the accuracy of the information that it's providing, right? And I've heard on a couple of different people, a couple of different podcasts, a couple of different sources, right? The accuracy is sometimes very suspect, right? And specifically on certain types of data, like for example, I heard that like the distance between two locations, it would provide one distance, and then if you were to look it up on Google Maps or something like that, the other the actual distance would be much different. And ultimately, like the idea specifically behind ChatGPT, right, is that like a lot of people feel like it is very confidently wrong sometimes, right? So like it sells a
It is
idea. It sells the idea that like this is the right answer. And that can be dangerous, right? Like if somebody goes to it and says like, yeah, ChatGPT just told me that this is the right answer. And it's not, like that can be dangerous. I'm wondering if you've seen like similar things with that AI specifically.
Yes, I mean, but what I think that the good idea or what the ChatGPT is trying to show us is that the potential that you can use this technology for your use case, and if you can find mistakes everywhere, and as you said, I mean, they say that they are the truth, but this is how they program the answer to be like that. But one little thing is that if you realize the answer that he gives you, it's not copied and pasted. I mean, it generates their own weight or their own writings. So this is the part that it's pretty amazing. It could be wrong, it could be right. I mean, of course, this is another conversation, another topic related of accuracy and so on. And this is why you will not use that in your environment or in your company. You need to fine tune that.
So is it more about the data source and the accuracy, right? Because if this is, if it's just a layer on top of like, the reference data, right? Like that reference data could be right. That reference data could be wrong. Like the internet's full of inaccuracies. We all know that. Is this just a like basically a highlight of that, right? Like, hey, I'm asking it a question. It's going to its data set and it's finding me the best answer that it has, right? And maybe that answer is wrong. Maybe it's right.
Absolutely.
Well, I think.
Yeah, sure. Got it.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I was just going to say, I think a lot of the problem here is that people want it to be a search engine, and it's not a search engine.
Yeah.
People treat it like it is, but it's not. Sorry, go ahead, Ethan.
Yeah, like Ezekiel said, it's generating that. It's not looking it up. And to that end, though, I did see a talk on YouTube. Let's see if I can find the link where they connected ChatGPT to Wolfram Alpha, which is more of a computational engine. And so you ask the natural language question, it will generate the answer. And then for anything that is computationally, and like I guess it would be an intent, as you said, and it needs some computation, it would then send that to the computational engine of Wolfram Alpha instead, get the actual accurate answer back, and then process that through the natural language again to give the proper answer back. So when you ask ChatGPT alone, what's the distance between Boston and Worcester? It'll give you some random generated answer that it guesses. Whereas if you ask it when it's connected to Wolfram Alpha, it will process that, realize, oh, it needs an exact distance, ask Wolfram Alpha what that distance is, and then translate back into a natural answer. So you can chain these together. They're not they're not fully discrete.
So I mean, like that to me highlights the fact that like the data source is important, right? And I think that's like common misconception out there in the world is like there are people that are pulling this thing up and they're like typing in their questions and typing in their stuff, but they think it's like doing its best to find the accurate answer, and they don't realize that it's just working with the data set that it has available to it, right?
And
Exactly.
it's generating.
Yeah, and it's
And-
generating, and it's the data that you have in the world. So imagine that you can learn from all the sources. You have tons of different opinions, different things, and it's the 100% of the opinions of the text. It's not represented on the internet, for instance. You will still have a lot of people that don't
Ah.
write things on the internet.
Yeah.
So
It's kind of that's a good segue, actually. I think to the next question. So it only represents, right? It represents the information available to it between up until 2021, which is relevant. It's not going to know anything about current events or anything. But so that's bias, right? It's biased in favor of the information available, but it's also potentially biased by the humans who made it, the programmers, right? So I wondered, you mentioned guardrails a little bit, and you mentioned that, but I wonder if, from your perspective, if there's a conversation happening about how to account for programmer bias. What type of programmer bias is identifiable, and then how do you address it?
well, it's the programmer part. I mean, you have the ethical AI, the responsible AI, and all the things that can try to verify what the developer is doing. It's not biased, and you have extra layers of verification and so on. But even if you like to remove those biases, you need someone, or you need layers, or you need things that needs to be protecting that stuff. And how could you protect the responsible AI to not being biased? So this is a real challenge. I know that there are a lot of conversations, papers, and research people working on that, because these generative AI or these algorithms in the future, they will be not dangerous, but I mean, it can help you to make some fraud. I mean, of course, they will not give you, if you like to go to another home, they will not give you guidances, because you have a responsible AI layer who says, okay, I'm not helping on criminal activities or whatever. But you can ask for other ways, and he can give you some kind of answers to say, if you like to write an email, a fraudulent email, he can guide you to write a simulate email, for instance. So how can you avoid that? You need other algorithms to perform as a responsible AI algorithms to the responsible AI thing done. So there is a huge trend that is how to verify what AI is doing, or how to remove these biases. And it started not so many time ago. I mean, it started just this year or 2 years ago.
I mean, I think there's an example out there, right, of an AI that was developed that within, I don't know, hours or maybe even days, right? It was basically corrupted to the point where it was very it had very negative opinions of certain types of people or certain situations, right? And that was, it was put out there as like, hey, this is an open thing, like people can use it. And then very quickly it realized, like, it started putting things together in ways that were were not ideal and just not kind, right? So
and one of the reasons that happens too, that people may not realize, is if you're using a platform like Reddit, for example, which is one of the things that trained ChatGPT, right? You can kind of self-select. This is the beauty and the pain of social media. You can self-select what you see. You can add to your feed. So sometimes you won't see how much negativity or vileness there is out there. But if you tell a bot, hey, go to this website, find every link you can, read every conversation you can, and ingest that, it's not going to have that bias, right? It's going to see everything, and it's going to ingest that negativity. And what you put in, you put out. So it sounds like part of building an AI is building that extra layer to kind of, it's almost like a child. Like you need to teach a child, this is bad. You don't do this or
Exactly.
say this or output this. You need to be mindful of that. Are there open source projects that handle that layer for you? Or is that something that you kind of have to do yourself?
No, I mean you have to use it by your own. There are some papers, I mean research papers that people that is working on that try to make it automated. I mean, so you can just use the project and you can try to use it into your project. But it's something that it's like applying rules, for instance, right? So you need to get it. But if you ask me about open source projects about it, I don't know if there is a huge project now, because
it's kind of like, I mean, that's a really like thorny topic, right? Because like ultimately it's public opinion or developer opinion, right? Of what is good, what is bad, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, right? So like to have a to have like a project kind of defining that, like, I mean, I think we could, if I were to spout out terms, which I'm not going to do for anybody that's hoping for that. If I spouted out terms, I think we could all kind of come to a consensus on like good, bad, evil, but like it seems kind of dangerous to me to like have an open source project or like a group of people that are kind of defining that for, your project. It goes back to Catherine's original question there about like programmer bias and that sort of thing. And, I think it's just a really tough issue to like, especially where you're trying to blend the two, right. To overcome.
Yeah, well, you can get some frameworks that can help you to implement that. I know that Microsoft has a frameworks and so on, but it's, okay. I mean, it's something that can help you, that can give you the framework, but you need to write your own rules, because it would depend on, in particular, as you said, I mean, who say that is right or wrong. So you need to teach that, to say, okay, this is wrong. These are bad answers, for instance. So trying to think in those bad answers, you as a model, for instance, and try to think is any answer is related with this particular stuff. And
it again highlights to me that like, I think people in general are looking for like AI to be like the savior and like the end all be all, right? And like at the end of the day, it still comes down to the person that built it and what their points of views were and how they did it and what points of reference they used.
Yeah, and it can help you as every tool. I mean, I think it as an extra tool, like computers 20 years ago or 30 years ago, when they think, oh, the computers will replace us. No, we are not talking with things to a computer. We are not going to the same places. So, and I think that AI is the same. It's a tool that, of course, it's trained with data. You need to fine tune your data. You need to verify what the answers that you are getting. So you still need people working.
Yeah, it's an assistive tool. We were talking before we started recording. We were talking about, I liken it to like autopilot on an airplane, right? Like airplanes are really automated these days, and there's like a lot of, you can essentially fly by wire, right? But you still have a pilot and a co-pilot in the cockpit to say like, oh, yep, it's really windy, or oh, yep, we're having this problem on the airplane. Like we need to adjust for that, right? And that's kind of where like I feel like AI comes in, right? Is like it's that assistive technology to make your life easier, make your job easier, do repetitive tasks. Like we all talk about automation. We don't need to bring that into this conversation, but like that's something where like an AI could essentially help with that as well. So let's talk a little bit, like obviously we're talking about ChatGPT, and that's one very specific kind of use case, one specific, AI implementation. But I'm wondering like, what is is it currently being used for other than like a fun thing for people to play with? Like, are there any actual use cases where people are using it to, this is going to sound insulting and I don't mean it to, but to do like something productive?
Well, ChatGPT itself, I don't believe that it's you can see it people using that in environments as a production environment. I know that there are some chatbots based on transformers that it's a narrow for something particular, but most people is using this model, the GPT or the transformer model. It's able to generate stuff, right? Generate text. So you can see that some people is monetizing that. There are some startups working to, okay, this tool can help you to generate your content, to generate your LinkedIn post or whatever, and people it's monetizing that. So you can pay for that companies and they can give you your LinkedIn post, Twitter post, or even content blogs or whatever. So this is the thing that is being monetized. The other one is, it's not, I mean, it's related with GPT, what is DALL-E, is similar than GPT, but instead of text, it's for images. So you can generate images, and it's the same. Being honest, I believe that it's an awesome technology. It's great. I mean, it's impressive, but I don't know how will be the future of that. If you're like, I don't know, are we looking to have a movie AI generated, completely generated by AI? I'm not sure.
Well, did you see the Seinfeld generated thing on Twitch?
I saw that.
Yeah. So for our listeners, somebody set up an AI generated Seinfeld episode that ran or stream that ran for about a month and a half straight. Everything was AI generated.
Yeah, I mean, it's good, it's fun. I mean, you can have some fun. It can help even with the producers or the editors, can help them to create some content. But I don't know if someone is monetizing that. The text part, I know because I've seen, and if you Google, you can find a lot of startups that is monetizing that. The ChatGPT stuff, I don't know how it will go.
So I think like one thing that comes to mind, and this could be $1 million idea, so feel free to take it if it is. But like one thing that comes to mind with like DALL-E, right, is like, and this is something that I'm in the middle of working through right now, but is like coming up with imagery for slide decks, right? Like typically my go-to is like just doing a Google image search and like looking around, seeing what I can find. But like, if I could go to a service, right, and say, hey, I need an image of this with this and that and this other thing, and it generated it for me, like that would be awesome. Yeah. Like I would, be very, very happy about that. One thing I wanted to go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think it's actually really great for that. I've seen people use it for stock images and blog posts with great success, especially, well, I'll give a plug to Joe Brockmeyer, who we used to work with. There were some really great examples of, for example, like the Twitter logo on fire and like disintegrating, and like you can create some really interesting stuff. And I've actually used it for things like mixed success for stock photo types, like slide stuff too. You input an idea and sometimes it takes several rounds of refinement to get what you're after, but you'd be surprised at how useful it could be.
Yeah, but it helps you with the first layer. When instead of starting in a white paper, you have something.
Yeah.
It could be the 100%, but at least it gives you something close to the reality, but it gives you something.
So one other use case I wanted to jump into real quick is GitHub, I think, is using some sort of, and I'm failing on the name right now, but they're using
Copilot.
Copilot. There it is.
Yeah.
But I saw or heard, I guess, a demo on a podcast the other day of somebody using like Copilot with just voice commands. That was like really awesome. And like, I think that that also has a great use case for accessibility, right? And being able to make coding more accessible to folks who may not be able to necessarily type something, or may not be able to do the actual physical task of coding something.
So I want to take a step back. I want to take a step back for a second and ask you, Ezekiel, is ChatGPT as impressive to you as more of an expert as it is to me?
Being 100% honest,
yeah, absolutely. I'm curious.
ChatGPT itself, I don't think that it's so impressive. I mean, of course, they did a great work fine-tuning the chatbot. They had they provided to the world to say, okay, this is what we have. But the reality is, you just build a layer that is a conversational layer with a model that it's already trained. So if you have the money, the people, and because the model, it's already there. I mean, you can go to Hugging Face or even OpenAI. You can use the API, and you could build your own chat GPT stuff. So I don't think that it's so impressive, because I mean, it's just in terms of research, in terms of course, it's a huge advance because it gives popularity to AI, because now everybody's talking about ChatGPT and it's awesome. But it's something that existed 3 years ago, 4 years ago. You could use GPT. I recognize that this part is pretty awesome. I like it because now everybody's talking about AI, but it's not so impressive. When you go underneath, you realize that, hey, it's just a conversational implementation of something that it's already done.
So it's novel because of the accessibility and the scope, not because of the underlying technology. So my follow-on question then is, what is something we should be impressed by?
Impressed by now? I mean, we can talk about some research papers related with a lot of things that are trying to go in the general AI, the generative AI stuff, the GANs networks, and all this stuff that is related with, okay, let's try to give autonomy to algorithms. That is the next generation, and you can see in some research papers that they are going in that side to try to give autonomy to the algorithms. But I mean, if someone finds something similar on that scope, that would be really impressive. What we can find for sure in the next years, lots of implementations close or similar to ChatGPT, for instance. You can use the transformer model. You can fine tune for your application, for your environment, with just a few examples, for instance, and you can do something great with text in our or in your scenario. I believe that will be the direction for the next years. But processing with, and also the other topic that is going really, I mean, it takes a lot of time to understand in our brains, because deep learning and those algorithms trying to mimic how we learn with our neurons. There is a trend that is trying to understand the neural stuff for our brains, to try to understand how we have sentiments, or how we have different stuff that it's not just learning. Because deep learning learn as a kid learns. You give examples, and the neurons that we have in our brains works in the same way as a deep learning, because someone understood the part of our brain and so on. But there are also parts that we don't even know how our brain works with that stuff, right? Sentiments, ironies, metaphors, or whatever. So this is a huge, there are a lot of interesting books about it. Not so easy to understand. They are pretty technical because the terms are related with neuroscience. But
Interesting.
once we figure out how the brain works with that part, it will be pretty easy to replicate in an algorithm, in a new generation of algorithms, for sure.
Okay. Very cool.
It's probably sci-fi, but it's it's pretty cool.
So I thought maybe we could bring it back around to the title of the show, so that we all love the Drupal here.
Yeah.
So we talked about a couple of things. We talked about generating code, much like GitHub Copilot, for example. We talked about search. We talked about using the API, right? You talked about building on the API. I wonder what your thoughts, and given the fact that you're not a Drupaler, but what are your thoughts about integrating or using something like ChatGPT with a web development framework? You write code, you can hook it with the API. What do you think?
Yes, I believe it can help because if you are writing code or if you are developing something, now we used to write a code. Maybe we ask for Google, for Stack Overflow or whatever to get insights, but we are writing the code. Maybe what ChatGPT could help is, instead of writing the code, we can say, okay, I would like to create an instance to write an object. I'm not a Drupal expert, so I can say something really wrong. But if you like to create something, instead of building that, you can ask to an algorithm in a conversational way, and he say, okay, this is the answer. You like the answer? Yes, I would like to change the color to blue. But you are writing, change this color to blue.
Yeah.
And it can change your code. This is the part that I see that can be very helpful when you're writing your code. But it will also imply a change it's a cultural change now, because the developers that we used to code, we don't use to ask questions to get a code. We code, and we are in the details and so on. So I believe that it could be a great tool, but it will also take some time to get adoption to developers, because I don't know, some developers could be really passionate to just coding by questioning, by Q&As, and others probably they will not like. But if they see that the answer is pretty good, they will probably be switching to the conversational way. But it's an interesting topic.
I actually played with it a little bit. I asked it to write me a module. I can't remember the details. I think it involved a mail hook to send an automated email or something. Anyway, what I actually found interesting was that it was actually useful. It was, if I'm a beginner, a Drupal beginner, and I don't know the documentation well or the API well or something, it's going to go and generate the probably, in this case, it was the correct hooks that I would need to develop the functionality. It didn't completely scaffold me out a module properly, but there are other tools you could use for that. The combination of Drush or something like that would probably help here. But what I thought was interesting, so obviously this, in my case, it was stuff you could get from API documentation. It was just hooks and stuff that's not contentious in any way. But if it were complex code, that code was trained on somebody else's code, right? So I think the most interesting question, especially in open source software and this kind of generative AI used for code, is attribution. Whose code are we using then? I think there are licensing questions going on, and you're probably familiar with those conversations. But I wonder what you thought about code and attribution and all of those issues.
Well, this is a huge conversation about, okay, who is the owner of this data? When you generate text or when you generate images or code or everything, who is the owner? If you go to the Hugging Face page or even the OpenAI, you will see a disclaimer who say, we are not responsible for those answers. So who is responsible? So if you are building no one, you are responsible. If you are using that in your application or you are facing a customer or whatever, you'll be responsible for that. So it's pretty easy to be in the part of the generating stuff and so on, but when you need to be responsible for those answers, they are not responsible for that, of course. So This is a
funny.
big conversation.
The attribution question to me like is I don't know, it's interesting because like I don't when I write code, right, I don't attribute like I don't give attribution to like VS Code because it helped me write the code, right? So like
Well,
I almost wonder like if you are using, you know, an AI to assist you, right? Like I liken that to like searching the web for like how to do something and finding somebody's code and then copying that into your code, right? So like I don't know.
I mean, it can be,
but
but
if
I think it's more complicated than that. I think there are several examples where it has generated. Again, you're talking about general versus specific, right? Or if it has a very specific functionality, there have been instances where somebody, you know, used, I don't remember if it was Copilot or ChatGPT, but to generate a code snippet, and it was almost character for character, an existing snippet of code that is not common. It's not something that you're going to find everywhere on Stack Overflow. It's quite easily attributed to a single programmer. And I don't necessarily know what the license was for that code. So I think that's where you raise that question.
That's the issue. It can copy code that is licensed to somebody that isn't open.
Yeah. Or is it more restrictive open? It may be an open license, but it's not the same open license that you're using in over here. So yeah, it's a complicated question.
It's interesting, even if you take the code out of it, like who owns the copyright because if you generate something now, ChatGPT itself says that they will never claim copyright on anything that they generate. And there's a lot of people online are saying, well, it's not generated by a specific human, so it's not copyrightable. But we don't know that answer yet, right? Now, and who knows how long you can rely on ChatGPT? Like I think them saying that they're not going to claim copyright means it's not copywritten. But if they change that in the future, I don't think that it's backwards. It's not backwards compatible, but moving forward,
I think you'd have to get a lawyer on the show to answer these questions.
So like, I don't know that anybody knows the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway and see what people say. Is ChatGPT like keeping a log of how it kind of like comes to these answers, right? So like, I mean, if it's using a known data source, right? And it knows that like, hey, I copied this thing from Nick and this thing from Catherine and this thing from John, like, and I put it together in my response. Like, is there like an audit trail you could follow there to say like, hey, I want to give attribution to those people? I don't know.
Well, there is another topic that is explainability or explainable AI. What are algorithms that they try to explain how an algorithm took that decision based on what, right? Deep learning, transformers, they can behave as a black box. So you can understand what's going on inside. And let's suppose when you are working with computer vision, the algorithm, the neural network knows if they need to detect a face, or internally, they have some neurons that are able to detect eyes, I don't know, whatever. But they are not able to say to you, okay, I think that it is a person because I found an eye, hair or whatever. So this is another topic. And this is why most of the algorithms are not implemented everywhere. Because for instance, in banks or in financial, you need to explain what you are taking that decision, what you are, accepting a loan or what you are rejecting a loan. You need to explain why you are saying. And this is another topic that has a lot of research inside, because it happens with people that were like, okay, I'll love ChatGPT, but I would like to implement in my case. And if you work in healthcare, you need to explain what you are taking that decision. Why are you doing that? And AI itself, or neural networks or transformer, they cannot give you the answer. They are just black boxes that give you output.
So this kind of leads into my next question, right? And as Drupal is open source, and we're all very fond of open source technologies, or at least I'm hoping that we all are. I'm wondering, like, what's the significance of open source in, connection with AI, right? And like, because I imagine, going back to Catherine's question about like programmer bias and whatnot, like I imagine, and like what you just said about black, this kind of being a black box, like I imagine open source AI kind of alleviates a lot of that, or at least allows people to shed light on certain aspects of of AI and machine learning algorithms that, to make them better, make them less biased, do good things, basically.
Yeah, open source is key. I mean, in AI, there is a lot of open source. I mean, most of the things are open source, but if you like to build something, you have frameworks, for instance, that are for free, TensorFlow, PyTorch. But you need to have knowledge. The second part is the models, because when you are training a model, you need tons of data, tons of hardware, money, time. You need a lot of time to train, for instance, something like GPT. But they open source. They don't open source the code itself, the model, because when you're training a model, you have inside weights, a lot of details that concerns about how the model works. They don't give you those weights, for instance. What they give you is an API to say, if you like to use a transformer, we give you those APIs that you can install, but they are black box. So they give you the freedom, so you can use a transformer, you can build your ChatGPT stuff, but you will need compute, you will need time, you will need a lot of things if you would like to fine tune, or if you like to retrain that model.
It makes me feel like we've gone back to like the Google algorithm, right? Like nobody really has insight as to how the Google algorithm ranks search results, right? And that's kind of like where we are again now with AI, is like, yeah, you can ask this thing questions and you can get responses, and like we'll show you the API that you can use to interface with it. But we're not going to tell you how the proverbial AI sausage is made. We're not going to show you exactly how things are weighted, or where it's getting, what sources it's using to come up with this solution.
Or even if they give you the weight, you have no idea what it means, because these are all the weights. I mean, you have no idea what it means.
Right. You don't know the difference between that weighted 1 or weighted 500. Like you don't know how that's being used, right?
Exactly. But the good thing is that it's open source. So you can use the model, you can download your model, and you can try in your PC, for instance. If you like to build an application, you need more hardware, whatever, but models, they are always free. But the general models, for instance, computer vision models, there is SSD or the YOLO, whatever. But the YOLO, the general model, they are able to detect 2,000 or 3,000 objects, I think. So if you like to detect something that is not able to detect, that the YOLO is not able to detect, you need to fine tune. To fine tune, you need images, you need to retrain the model. You don't need a lot of computation to do that, but it's something that you will need to do it. So what they give you, which is great, I mean, it's an architecture that it's something built, same as transformers, same as GPT, but they give you the general concept. If you like to use in your environment, you need to fine tune in that, which is great. I mean,
cool. Well, this has been super enlightening. Ezequiel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I mean, it was a pleasure to talk with you guys.
Yeah, I've been very excited about this show since Catherine hinted at it last week when we were chatting about this. So,
yeah.
Thank you for joining us. For our listeners, if you have any questions or feedback, you can reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter with the handle Talking Drupal, or by email at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on the Drupal Slack and the Talking Drupal channel. And I'd love to see examples of how you've been using ChatGPT as well.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/tdpromo.
And you can get the Talking Drupal newsletter for show news, upcoming Drupal camps, local meetups, and much more. You can sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
Thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. Learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and hitting that Become a Patron button in the sidebar. Okay, Catherine, get ready. Here's your opportunity for your shameless self-promotion. We love that.
Awesome.
Here.
Awesome.
Ezekiel, if somebody wanted to connect with you on the interwebs to chat about AIs and various things, how would they go about doing that?
Easy Lanza on Twitter, LinkedIn, Mastodon. You can find me there.
All right. Catherine, what about you?
You can find me, my preferred way these days is Catherine D at Librum.1 on Mastodon, but you can also still find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, all those places. You can also now find me at on the Open at Intel podcast, because apparently I love spoken word audio. So yeah, we've just launched another podcast, and I'm very excited about it. So yeah, you can find it at openatintel.podbean.com. You can also find me at reality2cast.com, and there's a contact form there if you needed that. But yeah, I'm in many places on the internet. So
awesome. We will put the link to the new podcast in the show notes for folks that might be looking for it. Catherine, again, thank you for joining us for the last 4 weeks. It's been great having you.
Yeah, it has been great. I should also mention what the podcast is about. The initial series is about open source security. So if that's your thing, that's where you want to go. But eventually we're going to get into AI, because we've got to dive more into this ChatGPT-esque conversation, but with an open source bias.
Interesting. Nick Laughlin, where can people find you?
Yeah, I feel like we barely scratched the surface today, but you can find me at NixVan, NICXVAN, pretty much everywhere.
And I'm John Picozzi. You can find me on all the major social networks, as well as Drupal.org at John Picozzi. And you can find out more about EPAM at EPAM.com.
And in closing, if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
Thanks, everyone.
Next week.